Hello, my lovely Natsuki's. It's your bestie Summer, and I am back with a lovely new part to this fic for you guys. This is going to be part 6, chapter 6 of Married to Winter, a DPXDC podfic written by corkinavoid and read by Summer Audio. Enjoy! Chapter 6. And in the end, our souls will find each other through time, even when I forget you. Beginning notes. As will be stated in the text, this chapter is set exactly 2 years after the first chapter. Soundtrack for the dance, Quiet Choir, by Akira Yamamoto, or alternatively, Vice Versa, by Yuki Kaijiura. Another alternative, offered by Kogito_but also Cooking. Golden Brown by The Stranglers. I can't add a link, unfortunately, but please listen to it. It makes the whole chapter experience ethereal. I love it. You know, you owe me a Yule Ball, Tim says out of nowhere, putting down the book he was pretending to read for the past 10 minutes. Danny pauses, then he slowly puts down his own book and turns to look at his fiancée blinking at him, like a cat woken up from a nap. He very much feels like that cat, too. The library time, as they both called it, was rarely interrupted. It was a tradition at this point to spend their evenings in here, reading quietly and occasionally showing each other parts of their respective books they particularly liked. Polaris? He asks, when Tim doesn't elaborate, instead just looking to the window, his gaze distant and dreamy. Do you remember when I came here? How could he ever forget the fateful night when Wind brought his fiancée here with no prior warning and against Tim's will? So Danny nods. Tim hums. Do you remember what night it was? He inquires, and oh, okay, Danny gets it now. At least he thinks he does. The Yule night. He closes the book and puts it down on the armrest of his chair. This is probably not a quick question, rather a long talk, if he knows Tim right. Over the past 8 seasons, come to think of it, today is an anniversary of their first meeting. They became a lot closer. Danny learned what his fiancée liked and what he didn't. He learned to cook some of his favorite meals and found out Tim's passion for both solving and coming up with his own riddles and mysteries. They grew comfortable with each other, Danny teaching Tim magic and Tim teaching him all the ways humans feel and act. To be honest, at first Danny was not sure their promise would work. After all, Tim still refused to even think about changing into a fae, but he explained it to Danny. Tim did not want to stay in Eternal Frozen all the time. He wanted to spend time with his family. Well, he still had the chance to do so, and he wanted to stay human for them. And that was okay. They had an eternity together. One human life is not a very long time, if you think about it. Besides, Danny didn't mind, not really. Tim was still Tim, no matter human or a fae. He was still his heart and soul. But the longer they spent together, the better Danny could understand his fiancée without the need of words or even looking into his eyes. And right now, Tim looked like he had some kind of idea, and it was a fun one. Maybe the fae ways were indeed growing on him, because that kind of mischief in his smile was not one of a human. I was working really hard on that Yule Ball. Tim turns to him, his eyes full of fox innocence. Months and months of preparation. A shame I never got to enjoy it. Danny tilts his head in confusion. Do you want to have a Yule celebration here? It is on a little short notice, but I think we could still invite someone. Winter Court does not usually celebrate Yule since we're very busy on the longest night, but maybe ones of Wild Hunt, or ones of Dragons, or ones of... Tim shakes his head, making Danny pause in his ramblings. No, I don't want a Yule Ball here, he punctuates, closing his own book and setting it aside. I want you to attend a Yule Ball in Bristol with me. Danny just stares at him for a few moments, digesting the proposition, and then his lips stretch in a smile of his own, completely uncontrolled and wide and undoubtedly toothy. For a regular human, that would be a face of a menace. But Tim just laughs and stands up from his seat, approaching Danny and standing on one knee before him. Would you join me, my prince? He says, this as more of a joke. But Danny feels his cheeks heat up nonetheless, and Tim's cheeks are also very much red. Please say yes, or it will be really awkward. Danny chuckles and leans down, pressing a soft kiss on the corner of Tim's lips. Of course I will, my heart and soul. He kisses the other corner of his mouth and laughs softly. How could I abandon my guiding star? Tim whines, an embarrassed sound. Danny knows it very well and presses a gentle kiss to his lips. Not the star references, Arcturus, or we are not going to make it in time. Danny pouts, but the smile just won't go away. Tim gives him another short kiss on the tip of his nose and stands up, dusting his knees. All right, come on then. We need to choose an attire. And also, do you mind making your eyes a little more human? I don't care personally, but I want it to be fun, and the voids full of stars instead of eyes tend to scare people. Danny blinks, and when he opens his eyes again, they're just like Tim's, albeit a little more blue and lacking a pupil. I could change into a human form if you like, he offers, but Tim shakes his head, his face smug. No, I want to show off my very unearthly promised one, and I want everyone to watch me attend a ball with the winter himself. But also, I don't want anyone to be afraid. Too much afraid, at least. He corrects himself, and Danny understands him. You want me to be the snowfall, but not the snowstorm? He's not asking, only confirming, but Tim nods anyways, practically gleaming with anticipation as they leave the library and head to Tim's quarters. Any other time, Danny would have said no on a visit to the mortal realm, but as he told Tim countless times, Fae debts are not really about what is being said or written, they are about how you feel, and if Tim feels like Danny owes him a Yule Ball, then who is he to refuse the heart and soul of the Prince of Winter? Besides, he is never one to turn down a little mischief, especially if it makes Tim happy. Dick is positively certain Tim had orchestrated the whole getting stolen by the Fae just to get out of Yule Ball preparations, which was sure one way to escape this nightmare, but the absence of the only other responsible sibling who knew how to organize a citywide celebration for nobles meant that the burden was firmly back on Dick's shoulders, and he had to do most of the tedious planning, choosing, scheduling, working around the budget, and setting the invitations. It is safe to say that Dick hated being the first in line to the throne. Alas, at the same time, he loved the Yule Ball by itself. When all was finally said and done, they got to just enjoy the evening, dance amidst the pretty white decorations that were to represent a frozen forest, and eat all the tiny foods the kitchen had prepared. So Dick was doing just that, enjoying, dancing, eating, and talking. He was having fun. Until now, that is. Now, when large, white double doors that looked like they came straight from an ice castle in a fairy tale appeared out of thin air in the middle of the dance floor. They were very beautiful, if you look only at the aesthetic aspect of it. White to the point it was blinding, covered with intricate frost patterns, slim and tall and rounded on the top. But they were still very much a thing that appeared out of thin air, and Dick was confident no one had this kind of a show scheduled and ordered from the mages. And something told him this was Tim's doing. The guests, though, were not scared of it. Thankfully, the doors were going along with the whole winter theme of the ball, and it was not unknown for the nobles to set up magic tricks to entertain the guests. They just stepped a little away from the doors and quieted down, waiting for the start of the show. Dick prayed to all the gods, real and unreal, for Tim to know what he was doing. He was the smart one in the family. Surely he wouldn't have done something completely stupid, right? Yet Tim was also the most unhinged one, who, in their right mind, agrees to marry the Fae, after all. A sound of multiple sleigh bells go through the air, echoing off the ballroom walls, and the doors start opening. There is no sound to them, no creaks, no scratches against the floor, no more bells. And when Dick finally gets a glimpse of what lies behind the doors, he feels the relief flood him so quickly that his legs almost turn to jelly. Seems like his asshole of a brother just wanted to attend the ball in his full engaged to a fae glory. Little pesky bastard. Like, at least some kind of warning wouldn't have hurt him. Tim steps inside the ballroom, hand on his fiancée's elbow, and Dick has to admit both of them look stunningly ravishing. Dressed all in white, Tim wears a cape that looks like it was made of tiny snowflakes on his left shoulder, and his partner having a similar one, only his is almost translucent and shimmering with soft greens and blues, almost like the crown on top of his head. Aurora Borealis, Dick realized, only in a solid form, made into fabric. Tim doesn't wear a crown, but he has some kind of silver tiara on top of his head, and in the bright light of the ballroom it looks like it is made out of ice, shining and cold. Maybe it is, now that Dick thinks about it. The prince is also wearing the same kind of icy jewelry. His long pointed ears have earrings hanging right from the tips. Dick has met the Winter Prince only once before, 1.5 years ago, when he delivered Tim back home right after Ostara, and he still remembers how not human he looked then, with his eyes of the night sky. But today, here and now, he looks not better, in Dick's opinion, but a little more down to earth. His eyes are a lot more human-looking, that's for one, and he is not glowing. And he is smiling, pleasantly and carefully, without showing his teeth. Seems like Tim had managed to wrangle the force of nature into the human standards. Good to see. Even though now Dick is a little scared of his brother, because if he managed to somehow make a fae look human enough, and then take him to a Yule ball, since Dick doubts this was the prince's idea, then what else is he capable of? The invisible bells chime again, and the door disappears like it was never there. And then Tim starts speaking, his voice clear and maybe a tad bit amused. Greetings to all nobles of Gotham. As some of you know, and as many have rumored, I, Timothy Drake Wayne, am engaged with the Fae Prince. So today I have decided to attend the Yule Ball together with my fiancé. Since who is a better guest here than Winter himself? Said fiancé inclines his head to his right, towards Tim, and looks like he is barely holding back a laugh. Tim doesn't spare him a glance, smiling sweetly at all the shocked and alarmed faces of nobles around him. Dick feels his blood run cold. What in the 7 kingdoms is this stupid boy doing? Saying his full name right in front of a fae? He searches for Bruce in the crowd of people, and when he finds him, King's face seems to have the same horror painted across it. I ask you to be polite with my future husband, Tim continues, and then turns his head to the prince as if asking him to also say something. And he does. The prince slides his gaze across the room, briefly pausing when he meets Dick's eyes, and inclines his head just a little forward. Not enough to even be a nod, but a show of some kind of respect nonetheless. I am Wayward Star, Prince of Winter. You all may refer to me as simply Prince for today, as my promised one told me that would be easier for you and me both. I will not hold in my memory any of the names I might hear, but shall you choose to speak to me, introduce yourself with a title and not a name true to your soul. Prince's voice sounds like a crystalline ice, like frozen lake and a quiet snowfall. Dick has no idea how he does that, but it's almost pretty. Almost. So, not only did Tim make him look human, but he also made him not follow the Fae rules for at least the duration of the Yule Ball. Scratch Dick being scared, he is terrified. His brother tamed the winter. Holy fuck. They needed to do something. Not like physically, but they needed to say something, because the silence is gradually growing from stunned to awkward. Dick stares at Bruce and pointedly looks to the prince as soon as they make eye contact, signaling him to step in, as the king of Gotham looks like he lost all kinds of manners when faced with his future son-in-law. Thankfully, his eternally constipated father figure seems to get the message. He steps through the crowd, approaching the couple, and nods shortly in greeting. We are pleased to have you both here today. Bruce doesn't really smile, but he curls his lips a little up. Wow, really playing up with being polite there. The Yule Ball welcomes you. Tim looks so smug it almost hurts to see. Dick sighs, closing his eyes for a moment. He should have known someone who stalked the shadow of Gotham for years will have absolutely no chill. Pun unintended. Yet, after the king welcomes the new guests by himself, the other guests seem to relax a little, and Dick hears the start of the murmuring returning to the ballroom. Tim guides his fiancée to the side in the general direction of where Dick has seen Cass, and no, this will not do. It's time to do some damage control because Dick worked so hard on this party and he refuses to let some Fae ruin the mood. So naturally, he walks all the way to his brother and his partner. Hey, Tim! He waves his hand at his brother, and as he is close enough, and the boy turns to him, smiling easily. Dick, glad to see you. He stops and turns toward him, and the prince follows his lead, also smiling. Okay, so they are doing first names stuff. Dick puts on his best friendly face and nods to the prince. As far as human hierarchy goes, the ruler of some country, even not a human one, is ranking higher than an heir to a throne. Prince, he greets, and puts all the talks Tim had with them about Fae to good use. I'm the first prince of Gotham. I would ask you to call me a prince, but that would be really confusing, so you can call me first. The prince laughs, a nice sound of icicles breaking, and nods at him. It is nice to meet you, even if not for the first time. Should your introduction mean I may call the other princes and princesses of Gotham by their order of ascension? Dick can proudly say he's an expert on jokes. Now, he may not know a lot about Fae, but this, right here, was definitely a joke. Somehow, this makes him finally relax on the presence of a Fae royalty. Oh, that is a great idea. He chuckles, throws a glance at Tim. Then your fiancé would be third. Tim makes an offended noise, but the prince only laughs at that softly before looking Dick in the eyes. He has to admit the eerie effect of it is greatly lessened by the fact that he has more or less human eyes now. To me, he is always heart and soul of mine, he says, and just by that phrase, Dick finally realizes why Tim had fallen for the guy so hard. It is not just a title. The prince is so honest it hurts. And he means what he says, maybe a little too literally for human comprehension. It is sickeningly sweet, but also it makes Dick smile and feel proud and glad and really, really happy. It doesn't really matter who the being in front of him is, as long as he treats Tim with all the love and respect Dick feels in his words. He is a good fiancé. A sound comes from his side, and Dick sees the prince's ear twitch, like a cat who's heard a sudden noise. And when they all turn in the direction the sound came from, sure enough, there is Cass, looking at the prince. She doesn't look alarmed, only curious, so Dick smiles even wider. This is the one and only Princess of Gotham. For the sake of numerals, she is fourth. He introduces his sister, but she shakes her head without looking at him. And what takes Dick, and also, unexpectedly, Tim, by surprise, the prince gives her a deep nod. Silent one, he greets her, and to this Cass nods. Tim tugs on his sleeve. You know each other? The prince turns back to him and shakes his head slightly. We have never met before, yet your sister is one of those who can hear the twilight and see the flow of the wind. Fae call them silent ones, for not even we can see them coming if they don't want us to, he explains, and Cass grins at all of them at once. You're saying she can kill a fae if she wants to? Tim rephrases, and Prince nods without a pause, and then looks back to Dick, his gaze thoughtful. As far as I know, everyone in your family could kill a fae, one way or the other. Silent One and Undead have bigger chances, and Demon Child is right behind them. Dick starts to get the things about the names. Undead is clearly Jason, but why did you call him Demon Child? He asks out of plain curiosity. He is more than sure Tim wouldn't introduce him as that, and he doubts Jason would share the nickname he gave Damien with someone, but instead of the prince, Tim answers him. Oh, you'll love that. Apparently, Jason guessed Damien's family name. Remember how I told you why I was called Child of the Winged? Tim smirks, and Dick raises an eyebrow before looking back to the prince. Do I have one? Greywing, Prince answers without thinking and looks to Cass. Spear. She nods, satisfied. Dick hadn't even noticed her asking anything, but at this point he is just going to assume the prince can understand her without words or signs. He can only assume the child part of the names are referring to age. Good to know he is an adult in Fae terms, even though he has no idea how that works. That reminds me, Damien insisted on being called Child of Iron and Stone, Tim suddenly supplies, and Prince turns his head slightly away. When Dick follows the direction he is looking in, he sees Bruce. Oh, so that's his last name. Makes sense why Damie decided on that specific name for himself, since Son of a Shadow would have been too on the nose. I know Prince said he won't remember any names, but should you really just be throwing them around? Dick decides to change the topic just a little, not hiding his concern, but Tim waves him off. Mentioning names is all right anyway, as long as you don't introduce yourself with them, and even then, there are several ways to keep your name safe if you do, he explains, and the prince chuckles. I already know all your names. Polaris told me a lot about all of you. I do not have them, I only know of them, so you do not need to worry. All right then. It doesn't exactly calm Dick down, but at least he feels a little better. Now, wait a second. Dick narrows his eyes at Tim. And what exactly, pray tell, have you told your beautiful husband-to-be about us? All good things, Tim answers without batting an eye, but Prince's smile turns a little sly, and Dick makes a long, disappointed sigh. He told you about all the times we've been annoying, didn't he? The prince just grins, this time with teeth showing, but Dick doesn't feel any danger in it, only mirth. Yes. Dick clasps his hands and mirrors the grin back. In that case, it is my brotherly duty to tell you all the embarrassing ones about him. So, when he was 14, oh, look, they started dancing. Tim cuts in, a little too loudly for it to be unintended, and points to the center of the ballroom. And then all but drags his laughing fiancé away from them. Dick can't help but smile at them. Happy, suddenly tells him Cass, and when he looks at her, she is watching the couple with a small smile on her lips. Me too, Dick agrees and offers her a hand, bending down in a formal and almost comedically deep bow. "Would you care for a dance, my fair lady?" Cass snorts and puts her hand in his. Barbara watches two uninvited but not unwelcome guests join the dance with only a mild interest. She has seen Tim's fiancé, or promised one, as he called him, which was very romantic, yes, only 3 times before today. 2 of those times happened over the past years, since the prince was always the one to bring Tim back after Ostara. However, the one to pick him up right after Samhain was always the same elf who came to the memorable Yule Ball 2 years ago. Wind carrier of frost patterns, if Barbara remembers correctly. The one other time she had seen the prince happened way before the whole engagement thing ever happened. 5 or maybe 6 years ago, when Tim only joined the shadows. She had a dream of a white-haired boy with long and pointy ears, sitting in a library, his nose buried in a book. At that time, she wrote it off as a trick of her imagination. Now she understood it was one of the visions. She was an oracle, no, the Oracle of Gotham. But she was not born with that power. It was given to her as some kind of a divine gift after she lost her ability to walk all those years ago. She didn't understand how or why, but Constantine told her that the prophetic abilities were a side effect from the spells the laughing madman used. That was good enough explanation for her. Although, at first, her visions were short and chaotic. Sometimes she didn't even realize it was a vision until later, like that one with the prince. Even now, years after she gained the ability to see the future, she tried not to rely on the visions too much. Time was an unstable substance, and if she knows something about fates and destinies, it is that they are never written in stone. Future can change, and it will change, whether she wants it to or not. Yet she likes being the oracle. She liked taking a glimpse of what had not happened before, liked knowing things others could not. Barbara takes a small sip of her blue and sparkling drink that Dick gave her, her gaze following Tim as his prince. She needed no visions to know that they will be happy with each other. Bruce can shove his paranoia right where the sun doesn't shine. With the way Prince has his eyes only on Tim, with the gentleness in Tim's hands on his shoulder, with the way they all but glide through the dance floor, not paying attention to anyone around them. She just knows they make a great couple. It is also very evident through how Tim gets gradually more and more excited as Samhain gets closer, and how grumpy and snappy he is when he returns to Bristol after Ostara. Prince misses a step and shakes his head slightly, his expression embarrassed, and Tim laughs quietly, taking the lead and saying something to his fiancé. Barbara hides her smirk in her drink. They are so adorable together that she is sure everyone at this Yule Ball is jealous. Prince misses a step again, only this time he doesn't look put out because of it. Instead, he huffs and asks something from his fiancée, and Tim nods after a moment. And something shifts. Barbara doesn't notice it right away, but years of being one of the shadows, even before she became Oracle, tell her that there is a change. Something in the air, in the way the music sounds, in the movements of people around her, is different. Not bad different, just not how it was before. Then she sees it. With every step the prince takes, the floor underneath him changes, white marble turning into something dark and sparkling, and it's the sky, Barbara realizes. He is dancing over the night sky, yet it's still solid, somehow, and when this darkness spreads across the whole ballroom floor, it reaches Barbara's chair, and she understands how. There is a layer of ice over it, crystal clear ice, like one you would see over a lake in early November. The couples waltzing through the dance floor notice it, too, but after a few gasps and shocked exclamations, they seem to understand it is still a very much solid floor and resume their dancing. Barbara bets they just want to use the chance to brag about dancing over the night sky later, but the reason doesn't really matter because the changes don't stop at the floor. The Winter Prince doesn't take his eyes off Tim, doesn't even as much as wave his hand or say anything. But the ballroom keeps changing, no doubt according to his will. Frosted vines made out of ice and snow curl up the white columns, growing translucent, crystalline leaves right as Barbara looks at them. Sparks of tiny icicles fill the air, glimmering like little stars under the bright candlelight, and as the last touch, it starts snowing. Small, fluffy snowflakes leisurely fall from the ceiling, and when Barbara raises a hand to catch one of them, it is not cold. It still melts at the touch, though it doesn't leave any water drops behind, seemingly just dissolving in her hand. It looks like a fairy tale come true. Barbara feels her breath hitch at the sight of the overwhelming beauty of it, and she really, really wishes she could join the dance. She is long used to being a simple observer, a bystander on every ball she attends, but right now she could give anything for just one dance. It's foolish, of course, not like she's going to. A familiar figure, dressed in a formal white suit, appears in front of her, offering their hand. Wind, carrier of frost patterns, stands before her, their white hair in an intricate braid, smiling gently and a little mischievously. "May I ask you for a dance?" Their voice is as calm as always, but Barbara still hears the smallest hint of amusement in it. She blinks and looks down to their hand. "I would be happy to agree, but, you see," she hesitates. Sure, she thought she would give anything for a dance, but that was only metaphorical. She's not willing to really give something to a fae for it. The risk is too high. But the fae just smiles a little wider, although still not showing their teeth. "Not to worry, beloved of time. I'm sure Everlasting One would not mind making an exception just this once." Barbara doesn't really understand, neither the title they gave her nor who Everlasting One even is. One thing she knows is that this sounds very much like some kind of a shady deal. "What do you want in return?" She narrows her eyes, and the fae in front of her suddenly looks a lot older than they seem. Their face is still smiling, but their white eyes seem sad and knowing, and Barbara looks away. "You have already given enough," she hears the fae say, and their hand is still offered to her and not moving, frozen in air. They have sharp nails, Barbara notices absently. "This is not a deal or a bargain," Wind continues. "Not an offer or a debt, only a little gift with no ties attached. After all, it would be a shame not to enjoy the Yule Ball when Prince of Winter has already made it a little miracle." Barbara throws a quick glance to where said prince is leading her brother, even if not by blood or by title, through the dance floor, over the starry skies, and surrounded by a magical snowfall, and decides, to hell with it. She puts her gloved fingers into Wind's cold hands, and they pull her up from her chair. Barbara waits for her legs to betray her, waits for the fall, but it doesn't happen. Instead, she stands up. Wind holds her hand gently but firmly, and, wow, turns out she is taller than them, even if not by much. Turns out she is just tall in general. She looks to the dance floor, and as soon as she blinks, it changes again. Gone are the white Yule decorations and couples gliding across the dance floor. Gone are are the throne and stained glass windows, and tables with foods and the music. Instead, the ballroom looks abandoned and long forgotten, marble floors cracked and columns covered in ivy. It is undoubtedly the same ballroom of the Wayne Castle. She can recognize it even in such a state, but the windows are broken and empty, and a part of the roof is missing, sunlight coming from above and illuminating the center of the room. It's quiet and empty, and Barbara feels a telltale tickle somewhere in the back of her mind. A vision, then, judging by the state of the place. This is some very distant future, hundreds, if not thousands, years forward. She's never had visions go so far in time before. She hears a soft sound, a footstep, echoing in the desolate room, and when she looks back to the dance floor, she sees two figures there. Her heart skips a beat when she recognizes them. White-haired boy wearing something akin to a hunter's outfit, and a black-haired one in a similar look. They slowly move through the room, lazily dancing to a tune only they can hear. Sunlight caught in their hair. None of them talk, but the way they smile, the way they hold each other's hands, is telling Barbara enough. It tells her of love, of care and devotion. Both of them have long, pointed ears. She must have made some sort of sound, because the white-haired boy suddenly turns his head towards her. His gaze meets hers. Barbara knows it's not possible. It's only a vision, a glimpse. She's not really present here, but despite that, the boy smiles and taps his partner's shoulders, nodding in her direction. The other boy turns his head. Tim's eyes are sky blue, and his hair is disheveled like it always is, and he blinks, seeming to recognize her. Barbara feels a pang in her chest as he smiles at her, happy and content and peaceful, serene like the scene of the long-forgotten ballroom of the kingdom that does not exist anymore. She can't help but smile back, feeling her eyes water and her chest tighten. She blinks the tears away, and the vision is gone, the music of the Yule Ball filling her ears again, and Wind's fingers holding her hand tightly. There was, or maybe there will be, a tale of a frozen prince and a North Star who came down from the sky to guide him out of the blizzard. It is said that the star was so bright and warm that even winter could not resist its shine, and the snow melted, giving way to the spring. The Fae tells to no one in particular, and Barbara snaps her head to them. Did you... She stops short when the Fae tilts their head and puts a finger to their smiling lips, wordlessly asking her to keep quiet. Your dance is waiting, beloved of time. Barbara lets out a long breath and blinks a few times just to get rid of the remaining tears in the corner of her eyes. It is likely she will never understand why or how the Fae do what they do, but at this moment she doesn't really want to. So instead, she takes a step towards the dance floor. Ending notes. I cried while writing this, and also while I was editing Babs's POV. I'm gonna admit that. I fucking love them. I love them all so much. And hey, Wind is back. They're here to give Barbara a little gift for the Yule. This is technically the end of Tim and Danny's story, as sad as it is. The rest of the chapters will be focused on other characters. There's a chapter on Danny and Bruce, and a few on Dick and Dan, and even one about Sam. I really, really hope you enjoy this chapter, because I love it with all of my heart. I kept dreaming of writing it since chapter 1.